I stood there in the marriage registration office, surrounded by happy couples, clutching a half-empty coffee cup that had long gone cold. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, ready to get our marriage license, and William had vanished after a phone call, leaving behind a hastily scribbled note. Something urgent came up. We'll reschedule. The urgent matter? Gloria had taken a tumble down some stairs and sprained her ankle. His text message came later, making my heart sink. Gloria's situation is more serious than I thought. Need to be with her. Let's push the wedding to another day. I couldn't help but laugh quietly, a hollow sound that drew concerned glances from nearby couples. I'd lost count of how many times William had chosen Gloria over me. But this time, something felt different. Instead of the usual storm of jealousy and tears, I felt strangely empty. An elderly official with kind eyes approached me. "Are you still going through with it, ma'am?" With steady hands, I pulled out my phone and messaged the man who had once promised me forever. "Yes, still doing it." The waiting area's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stared at my screen. "Wait for me. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he replied. Just then, my phone lit up with my mother's call. "Nina, have you and William registered yet? Everyone's waiting at the Oceanfront Hotel." I could picture the scene at the hotel. Both families gathered, the finest china laid out, my mother's business associates making small talk. Yet I felt oddly detached as I replied, "Mom, we couldn't register. Gloria hurt her foot, and William's at the hospital with her." The words came out mechanically, like reciting an old familiar story. But my mother's reaction was anything but calm. Her voice trembled with fury. "Reschedule? Just like that? Do you realize who we've invited? These are influential people, Nina. What will they think? What about your dignity?" Then she paused, and I could hear the realization in her voice, the understanding of just how much I'd compromised over the years. Her tone softened. "Nina, sweetie, what do you want to do? Whatever you decide, I'm with you." That's when my carefully constructed walls began to crack. I ended the call, memories flooding back. William and I had been college sweethearts, sharing late-night study sessions, dream-filled conversations, and promises of forever. After graduation, with both our families in the same city, marriage seemed like the natural next step. I remembered feeling invincible, like I'd won life's lottery. Then Gloria appeared, like a storm on a sunny day. The first time he left me for her, we were supposed to watch a movie. One phone call, and he was gone. Soon it became a pattern, always accompanied by explanations that tugged at the heartstrings. "She's an old friend who just returned from abroad. Her family's bankrupt. Her parents died in a car crash. She's all alone, Nina. Try to understand." And I did understand, perhaps too well, for too long. Gloria's family seemed perfect, wealthy, cultured, and they treated me with such warmth that I almost felt guilty for my unease. William started disappearing more frequently after she came back, our precious moments together becoming rare treasures. I remember spending weeks assembling a limited edition Lego set for him, the kind collectors dream about. He was a Lego enthusiast, and seeing his eyes light up made all those late nights worth it. But then Gloria happened to mention how much she loved it too. Her request came wrapped in honey-sweet words, and though William hesitated, the set ended up in her hands. I found out later and cried in my bathroom, water running to mask the sound. When I confronted him, his response was textbook. "William, she's just a friend, and she's going through so much. Don't overthink it. I'll build another one with you." And like always, I swallowed my hurt. That's William, kind to a fault, unable to say no, especially to her. The hiking incident happened about 6 months after our engagement. Gloria showed up unexpectedly, wearing pristine hiking gear that looked fresh out of a magazine. I'd seen her before, but that day, I saw through her mask. We were trailing behind the group when it happened. The accidental bump that sent us tumbling down the slope felt anything but unintended. The pain in my arm was excruciating, a sharp, burning sensation that brought tears to my eyes. That's when she showed her true colors. Leaning close, her whisper carried the chill of a winter wind. "Nina, sweetie, if I say you pushed me first, who do you think William will believe? Who gets his help first? Poor orphaned Gloria, or his jealous fiancé?" When our group rushed back, Gloria had transformed into a masterful performer, tears streaming down her face like a tragic heroine in a play. She played her part perfectly. "I think Nina might have been tired from the climb. I'm so sorry if I startled you." One glance at William's face told me everything. The moment I opened my mouth to defend myself, I saw it, that look of disappointment in his eyes. I was already labeled as the jealous fiancé who'd made scenes about Gloria before. My guilt was predetermined. Unreasonable, the word hit like a physical blow. I watched as William gently helped Gloria up, their figures becoming smaller as they headed back to the trail. Our friends tried to soften the blow with awkward comfort. "Nina, this isn't like you. Don't be upset. William just saw her bleeding." I merely shook my head, tasting copper from where I'd bitten my lip to keep from screaming. "Hey everyone, this story just took a wild turn, right? But trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. Want to know what happens next? Will Nina finally stand up to Gloria's games? And what about that mysterious Kelvin who keeps showing up at the perfect moments? There's this shocking scene coming up that completely changed everything. Even I couldn't believe it when I first read it. Nina's about to make a decision that will leave William speechless. And Gloria? Well, let's just say karma has some special plans for her. But before we continue this roller coaster of betrayal and unexpected romance, hit that like button if you're Team Nina. Drop a in the comments if you think she deserves better than William, or AI, if you think she should give him another chance. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. You definitely don't want to miss what happens next. This story has more twists than a pretzel. And the ending? It's absolutely not what you'd expect. Share this with your friend who's always giving second chances to the wrong person. They need to see this. Now, let's get back to Nina's story and see how she handles what's coming next. "Go on without me," I insisted, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. "I'll head back." Someone offered to accompany me, but I refused. My arm hung uselessly at my side, blood seeping through my jacket sleeve, but nobody noticed. They were too focused on Gloria's dramatic exit. The pain made each step down the mountain a lesson in endurance. I managed to call 911 myself, the phone slippery in my bloodied hands. Just before everything went black, I heard someone call my name in panic. The voice sounded familiar, but by then, I was too far gone to care. The voice calling my name echoed strangely, merging past with present. I turned to find Kelvin Chen, CEO of C Group, standing there in his impeccable suit. His story was legendary in our circles. Orphaned young, he hadn't just maintained his family's empire, but transformed C Group into a corporate giant. Our first meeting seemed like something from a movie. Me, visiting my grandmother during my last high school summer, accidentally saving the life of one of the country's most powerful young businessmen. I stayed with him through his recovery, and before parting, he gave me his number with a solemn promise, one request, anything within his power, whenever I needed it. Our families became close after that, regular dinner parties and charity events bringing us together. But thinking back now, I realized exactly when we drifted apart. The day I announced my relationship with William to my family. Kelvin's visits became rare, then stopped altogether. My fingers trembled as I typed out that desperate message to him. Kelvin was always hard to read, carrying himself with that untouchable air of someone who'd seen too much too young. But I had no choice. In our social circles, with William's family's influence, who else would dare to marry me under these circumstances? I wasn't even sure if he'd kept the same number, or if that long-ago promise still meant anything to him. Yet here he was, his designer suit suggesting he'd come straight from some high-stakes meeting. The tears came without warning, blurring my vision. I felt his gentle touch as he wiped them away, his voice carrying a hint of something I couldn't quite place. Why the tears? Didn't you ask me here to get married? Having second thoughts? I shook my head and pulled him into the registration office. The staff's surprised looks didn't escape me as we handed over our documentation. The process was surprisingly quick. Just a few signatures, a few stamps, and it was done. The same few minutes William couldn't spare for me, too busy tending to his first love's sprained ankle. Standing at my front door later, I stared at the red marriage certificate in my hands. Kelvin had rushed off as soon as we finished, mentioning something about a government contract bid he couldn't miss. But before leaving, he'd fixed me with an intense look. The wedding ceremony is still on for tomorrow. I'd nodded, grateful that he'd understood everything I'd explained in my messages. My phone rang just as I was about to call for a car. William's familiar, warm voice came through. "Nina, I'm sorry." For a moment, I thought he was apologizing for abandoning me at the marriage office, for choosing Gloria again, for everything. I couldn't have been more wrong. I was about to respond when Gloria's honeyed voice floated through the phone. "Nina, I'm so sorry. I accidentally ruined your wedding dress." Before I could process this, William jumped in with his familiar, soothing tone. "It's okay, Gloria. Don't cry. Nina isn't the type to hold grudges." Then to me, "Nina, since tomorrow's wedding is off, we can go pick out an even better dress another day." My heart felt like a deflated balloon. I didn't have the energy to ask the obvious questions, why they were at our new house instead of the hospital, or if William remembered how we'd spent countless nights in college designing that dress together, sketching every detail until it was perfect. The questions died in my throat. What was the point now? I was already married, just not to him. The memories of our college days still glowed warm in my mind. Those were beautiful times, and I couldn't deny William's sincerity. His eyes always showed his true feelings. But that was the problem. His sincerity wasn't exclusive to me. Since Gloria's return, I'd become just another person he cared about, no longer his everything. I remembered that party where a few drinks had left me tipsy. Coming back from the restroom, I'd frozen in the doorway, hearing Gloria's drunken confession. "William, I can't marry anyone else but you." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone knew about our engagement, and friends scrambled to change the subject. But I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for William's response. All he said was, "I'll get some hangover soup. Gloria's going to need it for her headache. Someone watch her." Even now, I couldn't quite name the emotion that had washed over me then. Disappointment felt too simple, heartbreak too dramatic. But it didn't matter anymore. Growing up privileged, I'd never known real pain until William. Looking back, I was embarrassed by how much I'd compromised, how far I'd retreated just to keep him happy. A love shared is no love at all, not for me, not anymore. "It's fine," I said flatly. "If something's broken, just let it go." My emotionless response seemed to startle William. No jealous outburst, no accusations, no dramatic scene. It should have been a relief, but I could sense his unease growing. "Is there anything else?" I asked, ready to end this pointless conversation. William started to speak, then stopped. Nothing else. As I moved to hang up, Gloria's voice drifted through once more. "William, should I pack these clothes for you?" I ended the call without a word, leaving William staring at his phone, that creeping sense of loss finally starting to sink in. William stared at Gloria, irritation creeping into his voice. "Don't pack my clothes. I'll get them myself and come back." Right on cue, Gloria's eyes welled up with tears. "William, you're all I have left. Are you abandoning me too?" His expression softened. It always did for her. "I won't leave you. But Gloria, you need to learn to stand on your own. I'll get my things myself. Besides, If it weren't for your emergency, I'd be marrying your future sister-in-law tomorrow." A sleek Maybach glided to a stop in front of me, its black surface reflecting the afternoon sun. A distinguished-looking man in his 40s stepped out, approaching with a professional smile. "Miss Nina?" I nodded, curious. The driver explained that Kelvin had sent him to ensure I got home safely. A small smile tugged at my lips. Maybe this arranged marriage wouldn't be so terrible after all. At home, I walked into the middle of my mother's well-practiced disappointment speech. But before she could build up steam, I casually pulled out the still warm marriage certificate. The sight of it stopped her mid-sentence. Dad, who'd been pretending to focus on the piano, gave me a subtle thumbs up. I couldn't help feeling a bit smug. I settled onto our leather couch with practiced grace, asking our maid for lemon water. My parents perched beside me like nervous birds. "So this means," Mom ventured. I nodded, my voice steady. "I'm not marrying William anymore. No more jealous fits, no more chasing, no more drama." The relief on their faces was palpable. "Finally came to your senses?" Dad practically glowed. "Always thought he was just a pretty face, like a decorative radiator. Looks nice, but not much use. Never liked him, to be honest." Mom waved the certificate like a victory flag. "But what about tomorrow's wedding?" she asked, practical as always. I met her gaze steadily. "The wedding's still happening. Our family's spent a century building its reputation. I won't be the one to tarnish it. I've already embarrassed us enough with all the drama since graduation instead of joining the company." I sat among William's dowry gifts after dinner, running my fingers over each carefully chosen item. He'd put real thought into them, the best of everything, perfectly suited to my tastes. How ironic that such thoughtfulness came from someone who'd leave me for Gloria. My phone lit up with William's name, and I stepped out into the October night. The evening air carried a crisp chill, and stars dotted the inky sky like scattered diamonds. The garden's flowers released their nighttime fragrance, creating an almost romantic atmosphere. Through the courtyard gate, I saw him standing under the streetlight, the man I'd fallen for at first sight years ago. His features were as handsome as ever, clean-cut and gentle, and his eyes brightened when he spotted me. My heart gave a traitorous flutter. This was the man I'd loved for so long. "Nina, have you eaten?" His voice carried that familiar warmth. I nodded, keeping my distance. "Did you need something?" William studied my face, searching for something. "Nina, I'm sorry about today. Missing our appointment." I cut him off with a calm, "It's fine. I'm used to it." I could see the afternoon's unease still lingering in his expression. He'd felt off balance since our phone call, like something precious was slipping through his fingers. That's why he'd come to see me before his flight to Germany. My unusual calmness seemed to unsettle him more than any tantrum would have. "Are you angry about me leaving you at the registry office and postponing the wedding?" he asked carefully. The question almost made me laugh. He knew it would hurt me, yet he'd done it anyway. Why? Because I was a fool who'd set the pattern. Every time he chose Gloria over me, I'd explode with jealousy, make a scene, then inevitably forgive him because my love outweighed my pride. He'd grown comfortable with this dance, secure in the knowledge that my feelings for him would always win out. Yet his own special consideration was always rationed when it came to me. Seeing my increasingly distant expression, William actually looked relieved. I could read the smugness in his slight smile. If this was just anger, he knew how to handle it. This was familiar territory. He reached out to ruffle my hair, managing to touch me before I could step away. "Nina, Gloria's ankle injury is serious. She needs to see a specialist in Germany within 48 hours, or there could be permanent damage. I have to go with her." The absurdity of it all hit me. "Why you?" I asked. "Are there no medical assistants left in the world? No caregivers? Why must it be you? Is our wedding that disposable?" William frowned, his tone turning patronizing. "Nina, You're the only one I truly care about. Don't make this difficult. I only see her as a sister. I wouldn't feel right letting her go to a foreign country alone. Once she's settled, I'll come straight back. Nina, when I return, I'll give you an even grander wedding." I wanted to ask if he understood what postponing our wedding for Gloria would do to me, but his phone interrupted. That special ringtone he'd set for her. The memory surfaced of Gloria bragging about it, and William's casual response. "She picked it in high school. You can set one too, so I know it's you." Back then, that simple revelation had hit like a punch to the gut. She'd been special to him even in high school. Gloria had always had full access to his phone, could look through it whenever she wanted. She'd always been his exception, while I was just there. I never set a special ringtone. I didn't want his leftover gestures, the ones he'd already given to someone else. Standing there now, it felt almost laughable that I'd spent years— "Gloria, be good now. Don't move around too much, mind your ankle. I'll be there soon." His voice held that gentle tone reserved just for her. Then he turned to me, awkwardly checking his watch. "I need to go, Nina. I'm running late." I tried to speak. "William, but a car horn cut through the night air. He stepped forward, wrapping me in a tight embrace that felt more like goodbye than promise. "Wait for me, Nina. I'll come back to marry you." Then he was gone, hurrying away like he always did. I stood silent, knowing there was no future left for us to share. From his car, William looked back at my figure under the streetlight. Something squeezed his heart, unleashing a wave of panic. A voice in his head screamed to go back, to hold me, to tell me Germany could wait. As I grew smaller in his rearview mirror, he almost ordered the driver to stop. But then Gloria's ringtone— I snuck a glance when Calvin emerged from his shower, relief washing over me at the sight of his modest robe. My fingers twisted nervously in the sheets as he approached, and I could feel the warmth radiating from him as he leaned close. When I heard his soft laugh, I looked up to find his eyes dancing with gentle humor. The way he looked at me made my heart skip a beat. His hand, warm and gentle, carefully untangled my death grip on the sheets. "Don't hold on so tight," he whispered. "You might hurt yourself." I couldn't meet his eyes, but he simply moved to his side of the bed. "I know this marriage was rushed," he said softly. "Take all the time you need. My feelings won't change." The way he said it told me he knew about William, and somehow that made me feel both guilty and grateful. A wave of emotion hit me unexpectedly. Had I made a mistake, rushing into this marriage? But something about Calvin's presence felt right. I'd worried about sleeping next to someone I barely knew in a strange place, but exhaustion won out. Sleep came surprisingly easy. The next morning, I woke up feeling wonderfully cozy, snuggled against what I thought was my pillow. Something felt different, though. My eyes traveled upward to meet Calvin's alert gaze, twinkling with amusement. I scrambled to sit up, my face burning. "I'm so sorry," I stammered. "I'm a terrible sleeper." Calvin just smiled and gently ruffed my hair. "Don't apologize," he said warmly. "We're married now, remember?" After we got ready, Calvin had another surprise waiting. "Let's see our new home," he suggested. What I didn't expect was finding our house right next door to my parents'. Overwhelmed with joy, I couldn't help but explore every corner of the ground floor, feeling like a child on Christmas morning. Maybe this rushed marriage wasn't such a bad decision after all. I watched Calvin standing by the sofa, his gentle smile warming the room. The pain of letting go of William wasn't as crushing as I'd expected. Instead of heartbreak, I felt a quiet mix of sadness and freedom. A week had passed since the wedding, and William hadn't reached out once. It stung a little, but knowing he was busy caring for his first love made it easier to accept. If I hadn't married Calvin, that week would have been unbearable. The gossip would have spread like wildfire, and I would have been the talk of the town. Looking at William's silence now, I made a quiet promise to myself. No more waiting. But surprisingly, this small disappointment barely touched my happiness. As Calvin walked toward me, my smile came naturally. Finally, I had someone who was truly mine to cherish. Life with Calvin was nothing like I'd imagined. He wasn't the cold, distant husband I'd prepared myself for. The rumors had painted him as someone who'd never been in love, which is why I thought this marriage of convenience would work. But his endless kindness made me wonder if there was more to his feelings. I found myself watching him in his study, lost in thought. "What's on your mind?" he asked, catching my stare. I wanted to ask if this marriage was more than just a promise to him, if he might actually have feelings for me, but the words stuck in my throat. "Never mind," I laughed nervously. "Get back to your work." I told myself not to read too much into his kindness. He was probably just being a good husband. As I turned to leave, his arms wrapped around me, his familiar cool scent enveloping me. I heard him sigh above my head. "Nina, I thought I was being obvious enough." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. Calvin looked into my eyes with an intensity that took my breath away. "Nina, I like you. I've liked you for a long time." Living next to my parents turned out to be wonderful. We often joined them for dinner, where Dad would show off his piano skills and cooking talents. He loved telling the story of how he won Mom's heart, first with his music, then with his cooking. She was quite the catch, he'd say, a proud red rose. I couldn't help but feel envious of their beautiful love story. Calvin noticed my wistful expression and whispered in my ear, "If you like, I'll cook for you too." My parents' knowing smiles made my face burn bright red. After Calvin's confession, everything changed. Our relationship deepened, and I learned the truth. He'd fallen for me at first sight. All this time, his heart had belonged to me without my knowing. I couldn't contain my joy and had to tell Mom. She just gave me that look mothers give when their children finally figure something out. "I knew all along," she said, "ever since you helped him years ago. He kept finding reasons to visit us. Your father and I thought it was gratitude at first, but we saw—" Mom continued her story with a knowing smile. "When Calvin realized we'd figured him out, he was very honest with us. He said you were just starting college, still finding your way. He'd wait until you grew up a bit. Your father and I were impressed. He's local. And yes, 6 years older, but that's nothing. Being the lady of his household would mean no mother-in-law problems or complicated family politics. But then," Mom's voice turned frustrated, "you dropped the William bomb in your sophomore year. We were mortified. Calvin visited us after you went public with William. Said if you'd found someone else, he'd step aside quietly. He stopped visiting, but kept sending those thoughtful gifts." Mom's face darkened as she continued. "We had this perfect match right here, and instead we got William. Sure, he's good-looking, but what else? No backbone, easily influenced, and that family of his. If he hadn't been sweet to you at first, we wouldn't have even let him through the door. And look how that turned out. He abandoned you so quickly. We tried telling you so many times, but you were completely love-blind. Then the wedding got called off. For his first love, no less." I had come to brag about my happiness with Calvin, but now I understood why my parents hadn't said much when we got our marriage license. History was repeating itself, but this time with a better ending. Seeing Mom getting worked up, I desperately looked toward the door and blurted out, "Calvin!" Mom stopped mid-sentence. I seized the chance to escape, hurrying out to find Calvin and Dad sharing tea in the garden gazebo. Without a word, I grabbed Calvin's hand, ready to leave. Calvin rose, confused but understanding. Dad just waved us off with a knowing smile. As we walked, arm in arm, Calvin noticed my troubled expression. "Are you upset?" he asked softly. I shook my head, not knowing how to explain. He pulled me close, but our moment was shattered by an angry voice. What do you think you're doing? The words cut through the air like ice. I turned to find William, looking exhausted and angry, with Gloria hovering uncertainly behind him. His eyes were bloodshot, fixed on Calvin's arms around me. I buried my face in Calvin's shoulder, unable to face them. Calvin's embrace tightened protectively, his eyes meeting William's with cool mockery. This doesn't concern you anymore. William lunged forward, trying to grab my hand, but Calvin smoothly moved us away, letting go of me just enough to create space between us and William. William's hand trembled as he positioned himself between us. Nina, don't be afraid. I'm here now, he said, his voice struggling to stay steady. Nina is my fiancé, he declared. Calvin has no right to hold her like that. He owes me an explanation. Looking at Calvin standing protectively in front of me, my emotions were in turmoil. For over a year, every time Gloria had caused problems, William had always defended her, always trying to explain things away. All those times with Gloria, his words echoed in my mind. Nina, stop causing trouble. Nina, apologize. Nina, shouldn't you? Not once had he truly stood by my side. Now, watching Calvin's eyes narrow dangerously at William, I felt a strange sense of peace. William, you want an explanation? Calvin's voice was razor sharp. Why don't you explain first? Explain why you had people watching your first love, why you canceled our wedding at the last minute, why you left your fiancé to face the scandal alone, and why you took Gloria to Germany. Let's start there. William stiffened, his hand shooting out to grab mine. Nina, it's not what you think. I can explain everything. But before I could react, Calvin smoothly broke William's grip. Mind your manners, Master William. Don't handle my wife so roughly. Your wife? The color drained from William's face. That's impossible. Nina is my fiancé. We were getting married. His voice cracked, his bloodshot eyes searching my face desperately, silently begging me to deny it. Instead, I stepped closer to Calvin, our shoulders touching. I am his wife now. We're already married. William stood there, paralyzed by shock, until his legs gave out. Gloria rushed to steady him, murmuring, "Nice quick switch, Nina." I didn't even bother to look at her. One stern glance from Calvin was enough to silence her completely. William shoved Gloria's hand away, rage building in his eyes. So the wedding wasn't canceled. You just replaced me? Nina, how could you? Getting married to someone else on our wedding day. His whole body shook with anger. Yes, I got married, I said quietly. It was my wedding day, while you were in Germany with Gloria. No contact for a week. If he'd bothered to call anyone back home, he would have known. If he'd cared about anything besides Gloria, he wouldn't be learning about this now. But he was too busy across the ocean, devoted to his first love, his concern reserved only for her. I could see the pain etching itself across William's face. He tried to explain. His phone was lost in Germany. Time was short. He didn't replace it. Borrowed someone else's instead. He meant to call, but there were constant interruptions. He knew I must have been upset, but he had it all planned out. Heal Gloria's foot, return home, give me an even grander wedding to make up for everything. In his mind, he'd make it right. He'd treat me better, keep Gloria at arm's length, except for the obligation of gratitude, maybe throw some money her way for her family's past kindness. He couldn't let me wait anymore. He was so sure of my love for him, but the jet lag and shock were too much. He collapsed right there. His driver must have been nearby, rushing over at the commotion. Together with Gloria, they helped William into the car. Without a backward glance, I took Calvin's hand and headed home. Nina. Calvin's voice was soft, teasing. This is the first time you've reached for my hand first. His playful, magnetic tone made me blush furiously. Through gritted teeth, I tried to hide my embarrassment. What, am I not allowed to hold your hand? I asked defensively. Calvin's laughter was warm and tender. You can. Only you have that right. When we got home, I asked him about everything Mom had told me. Calvin nodded, his eyes softening. I spent almost a year around you, and you never fell for me. I guess I just wasn't your type. I shook my head frantically. No, that's not it. I never let myself think of you that way. I thought you were way out of my league. Calvin's smile was gentle. As long as you don't dislike me, we can take things slow. That's when I discovered something amazing. That day when William, Gloria, and I went hiking, and someone rescued me at the mountain's base? It was Calvin. He'd helped me without ever taking credit. Later, I heard William was in the hospital with a high fever. I thought that would give me some peace, but then our housekeeper told me someone had been standing outside for ages, asking to see me. I nodded, knowing it was time for a real conversation. I don't remember when he finally left. When I told Calvin about it later, he listened quietly, his face calm. At the end, he just hummed softly. His mild reaction puzzled me, and seeing my confusion, he explained gently, Nina, I understand you better than you think. When you asked me to register our marriage, I knew you'd truly let him go. I knew you wouldn't choose him again. I was stunned, then burst out laughing. Really? But Calvin, you're holding that file upside down. Calvin froze for a moment, flipped the file over, and joined in my laughter, the moment light and sweet between us. A few days later, while shopping with Mom, we ran into an aunt who couldn't wait to share the latest gossip. After recovering from his fever, William had locked himself away, drinking heavily and refusing to see anyone. Then someone sent him an audio recording revealing the truth. Gloria's injury wasn't serious at all. She had bribed the hospital to falsify records. When William confronted Gloria, it erupted into a massive fight. He cut off all financial support and blacklisted her in the industry. It came out that Gloria hadn't even finished her studies abroad. Now, without a proper degree and blacklisted, she was struggling to survive. William's grandfather, furious about the scandal and his grandson's poor judgment, banished him to a remote branch office for training, effectively crushing his ambitions for power. Fate had one more meeting in store for us at a party. I was there with Calvin, who was busy networking. Needing some air, I stepped outside, and William soon followed. He looked thinner, more weathered, the spark gone from his eyes. Nina, I'm leaving in a few days. I just wanted to see you one last time. Take care. His voice was rough, his eyes red-rimmed. These past days have made me think a lot. I was so wrong, and I caused you so much pain. I'm sorry, Nina. I'm truly sorry. I nodded slowly. It's all behind us now. Are you done? William's lips trembled, words catching in his throat. The silence stretched between us, heavy with memories. Back in college, we never ran out of things to say. After graduation, during our rare moments alone, I was the only one still trying to fill the silence. The silence between us now felt right. I had nothing left to say, and he had run out of words. Finally, I turned and walked away, following my own path. At the end of the corridor, where warm light spilled in, I saw Calvin. He was leaning casually against the stairs in his perfectly tailored silver-gray suit. When he heard footsteps, he looked up, and those eyes that once seemed so cold melted into warmth at the sight of me. I realized then how fortunate I was. But somewhere across the city, another conversation was taking place. Calvin, you're the one who made me go back to William. Now I'm blacklisted and my life is ruined. You can't just abandon me like this. Gloria's voice trembled over the phone. I merely pointed you in a direction. You walked this path yourself. Calvin's tone was mockingly cold. Watch what you say, or else. But before she could finish her threat, he hung up. Calvin turned back to the bed where I lay half asleep, gathering me in his arms and placing a gentle kiss on my forehead. Stop it, I murmured sleepily. my voice slightly hoarse. "I'm tired." His eyes sparkled with both amusement and deep affection. "Okay, baby. Go back to sleep." The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Calvin had orchestrated everything, knowing exactly how William and Gloria would act, leading to this moment where I was finally, truly his.